After burying my son, my daughter-in-law said, "Stop crying, pack your bags, and learn to survive." I wiped my face and spent the next 2 weeks living out of my car. That's when my son's lawyer called with news that changed everything. Hi, everyone. I'm so glad you're here to listen. Stay here with me through this whole story and let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far my stories travel. You see, Zara didn't just kick me out of that house. She kicked out the one person who knew exactly what Caspian had been planning in his final months. She thought she'd won it all. The house, the children, the fresh start she'd been dreaming about since the day he got sick. What Zara didn't know is that Caspian had been watching her, recording her, documenting every cruel word, every heartless plan she whispered on late-night phone calls to her sister. She thought she was getting rid of a powerless old woman. She had no idea she'd just activated a $7 million trap. So if you want to know how a woman who threw away her husband's belongings went from victory to complete devastation, how someone who thought she'd silenced me forever ended up begging for mercy, come closer. This is how reckoning begins. I never thought that losing Caspian would be the second worst thing to happen to me that week. He had been gone for exactly 7 days when Zara walked into the kitchen where I sat organizing his prescription bottles, my hands shaking as I tried to make sense of medications he'd never need again. The sympathy flowers from the funeral were already wilting on the windowsill, their sickly, sweet smell mixing with the lingering scent of his aftershave that still clung to the bathroom towels. "Diane, we need to have a conversation," she announced, her voice carrying a sharpness I'd never heard before. Not the gentle, understanding tone she'd used at the service when the neighbors were watching. I looked up from the pill bottles, expecting maybe a discussion about the children's school schedules, or perhaps decisions about Caspian's clothing. My daughter-in-law stood in the doorway wearing an expensive workout set that probably cost more than my monthly pension check. Her freshly manicured nails tapped impatiently against the doorframe. "Of course, dear. What's on your mind?" I asked. Zara stepped into the room, but remained standing, towering over me as I sat hunched at Caspian's favorite spot at the breakfast counter, the same stool where he'd eaten cereal every morning for the past 4 years since I'd moved in to help with the twins. "I've been thinking about our living arrangement," she began, and something cold settled in my chest. With Caspian gone, things obviously need to change. The twins and I need space to process our grief properly. And honestly, having you here is just making everything harder. I blinked, trying to understand what she was saying. Harder? How am I making things harder? You're constantly weeping, always touching his belongings, always bringing him up in conversation like he's about to walk through the door any minute. Her voice was steady, almost clinical. "It's not healthy for Lily and Jake to see their grandmother completely falling apart like this." Her words hit me like ice water. The twins were only 6 years old. They'd lost their father, and now she was suggesting they shouldn't see me grieve for my son. "They need stability, not constant reminders of what they've lost," Zara continued, studying her reflection in the chrome surface of the refrigerator. "I think it would be best for everyone if you made other arrangements." "Other arrangements?" I felt the kitchen tilt slightly around me. "Zara, this is my home too. Caspian and I discussed this before he got sick. He wanted me here to help with the children, to be close to family after—" She let out a short laugh that held no warmth whatsoever. "Caspian said a lot of things when he was heavily medicated and not thinking clearly. The reality is that this house is in my name, and I need you to start packing your things." The words felt like a physical blow to my chest. "Don't be dramatic, Diane. You're a grown woman. Make your arrangements and learn to manage on your own." Zara paused to check her phone, scrolling through messages like she was discussing weekend plans instead of destroying my life. "Caspian always said you were stronger than you acted. Besides, you'll figure something out. You always do." I thought about my meager savings account, the one Caspian had helped me set up when I moved in. Barely enough for a security deposit on a studio apartment, Certainly not enough for first and last month's rent in this expensive neighborhood where my grandchildren lived, where Caspian was buried, where my entire world existed. What about Lily and Jake? My voice came out smaller than I intended. I watch them every day after school. I help with homework, make dinner, give them baths. I'll figure that out, she interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. Maybe it's time they learned more independence anyway. Caspian babied them too much, and honestly, so do you. The casual cruelty in her tone made my chest ache. These were her own children she was talking about, the same children who ran to me when they had nightmares about their daddy not coming home, who asked me to read the same bedtime stories Caspian used to tell them, who called me their best grandma because I was their only grandma. Zara's parents had moved to Florida years ago and rarely visited. How long do I have? I managed to ask, my hands gripping the edge of the counter. I'd like you gone by tomorrow evening. I have an interior designer coming to look at redecorating Caspian's office, and I don't want any awkwardness. Tomorrow evening, 24 hours to dismantle the life I'd built here over the past 4 years. Ever since Caspian had insisted I sell my little condo downtown and move in to help when Zara went back to work after maternity leave. Where am I supposed to go, Zara? I don't have anywhere lined up. Could I have a week, maybe just a few days to find something? Her expression didn't soften. If anything, it grew more impatient. Diane, I really need you to stop making this harder than it has to be. Caspian is gone. The situation has changed. You're not my responsibility anymore. Not her responsibility. After 4 years of cooking dinners she was too busy to make, of staying up with sick children while she traveled for work conferences, of keeping this household running while she maintained her social calendar and gym membership. After 4 years of being the grandmother who never missed a school play or soccer game, who remembered every favorite snack and bedtime routine, who was there for every fever and scraped knee when Zara was too busy to leave work early, I nodded slowly, not trusting my voice to remain steady. I'll pack tonight. As I started to rise from the stool, Zara's voice stopped me cold. Oh, and Diane, I'd appreciate it if you didn't make a big scene with the children. They're already dealing with enough trauma from losing their father. The last thing they need is to see you having some kind of breakdown. That night, I packed my belongings in the same suitcases I'd brought when I moved in 4 years ago. It was shocking how little I actually owned. Most of the furniture in my room had belonged to the house originally, and I'd gradually donated or given away most of my possessions over the years, keeping only the essentials and a few precious mementos. I tucked Caspian's favorite navy sweater into my suitcase, along with a framed photo of him teaching the twins to ride their bikes last summer. I left behind the small television he'd bought for my room, the comfortable reading chair that had been his housewarming gift to me, the bookshelf filled with novels we'd shared and discussed over Sunday morning coffee. The hardest part was writing the note for Lily and Jake. How do you explain to 6-year-olds that their grandmother is leaving without making their mother look like the villain? How do you say goodbye without promising to see them soon when you have no idea where you'll be living? In the end, I kept it simple. Grandma Diane had to move to a new place, but I love you both so very much. Be good for Mommy. Hugs and kisses always. I left the note on their bathroom mirror where they'd find it in the morning after I was already gone. I couldn't bear to face their confused questions or see their tears. Zara was right about one thing. They'd already lost their father. They didn't need to watch their grandmother fall apart too. As dawn broke over the suburban street where Caspian had been so proud to provide his family with their dream home, I loaded my car with everything I had left in the world. The trunk barely closed over my belongings, and the back seat held the few groceries I'd managed to grab from the pantry: crackers, peanut butter, bottled water, things that wouldn't spoil quickly. I sat in the driveway for a long moment, looking up at the house where my son had lived his final years, where my grandchildren were probably still sleeping peacefully in their beds, unaware that their daily constant had just vanished from their lives. Zara appeared at the front window, coffee mug in hand, watching me with the same expression she might wear while observing a neighbor's garage sale. Making sure I actually left, I realized. Making sure I didn't change my mind and come back to complicate her fresh start. 2 weeks. That's how long a person can live in their car before the shame becomes almost unbearable. I'd found a spot behind a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of town, far enough from Caspian's neighborhood that I wouldn't risk running into anyone I knew, but close enough that I could still drive by the twins' school sometimes and catch a glimpse of them at recess. Pathetic, maybe, but those brief sightings were the only light in my increasingly dark days. My daily routine had become a careful choreography of survival and dignity. Every morning at 6 a.m., when the diner opened, I'd go inside and use their restroom to wash my face and brush my teeth. I'd order a cup of coffee and a piece of toast, the cheapest items on the menu, and sit in a corner booth for as long as I could make them last, sometimes stretching one coffee for 3 hours while I read yesterday's newspaper someone had left behind. The worst part wasn't the physical discomfort, though sleeping curled up in the driver's seat had left my entire body aching in ways I'd never experienced. It wasn't even the fear, though every night brought new terrors, strange noises, flashlights from security guards making their rounds, the constant worry that someone would realize I was living in my car and call the police. The worst part was the invisibility. I'd become a ghost of my former life. Yesterday, I'd seen my neighbor Patricia at the grocery store, where I was buying another loaf of bread and jar of peanut butter. My diet for the past week. She'd looked right through me as if I wasn't standing 3 feet away. We'd had coffee together dozens of times, had exchanged Christmas cookies for 4 years, and now I was invisible to her. I understood why. I looked homeless because I was homeless. My clothes, even though I tried to keep them clean in the diner's bathroom sink, were wrinkled from sleeping in them. My hair hung limp around my face, and there were dark circles under my eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. But it was more than my appearance. It was like I'd crossed some invisible line that separated the housed from the unhoused. Once you crossed it, people couldn't see you anymore. You became part of the landscape they drove past, a problem they didn't want to acknowledge. The hardest moment came when I decided to drive by Caspian's house, my former home, to see if I could catch sight of Lily and Jake playing in the backyard. What I saw instead made my stomach clench with a mixture of rage and heartbreak. There was a dumpster in the driveway, overflowing with furniture and belongings. I could see Caspian's desk, the one where he'd helped the twins with homework every night. His bookshelf, still loaded with the novels we'd discussed over coffee. The comfortable recliner where he'd fallen asleep watching movies with the children on Sunday afternoons. And standing beside the dumpster, directing 2 men who were carrying out more furniture, was Zara. She was wearing designer athleisure that probably cost more than I'd spent on groceries in the past month, her phone pressed to her ear, laughing at something the person on the other end was saying. I watched as they brought out the small dining table from Caspian's home office, the one where he'd set up his laptop during his final months when the stairs became too difficult. The table where he'd spent hours organizing family photos, writing letters to the children for future birthdays he knew he wouldn't see. Zara waved dismissively as they tossed it into the dumpster with a crash that I could hear from half a block away. I drove away before she could see me, my hands shaking so hard I had to pull over in an empty parking lot and sit until the worst of the trembling stopped. How could she just throw away everything that connected the children to their father? How could she erase him so completely, so quickly? That evening, I made the mistake of checking Facebook on the library's public computer. Zara had posted a photo of herself in what looked like a completely redecorated living room, everything white and chrome and minimalist. The caption read, "Sometimes you have to clear out the old to make room for the new, feeling grateful for fresh starts." The comments were exactly what I expected. Friends praising her strength, her courage, her ability to focus on the future. Someone had even written, "Caspian would be so proud of how well you're handling everything." I closed the browser without reading anymore. That night, Huddled in my car behind the diner, I allowed myself to cry for the first time since I'd left. Not the silent tears I'd been leaking for weeks, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere so buried I'd forgotten it existed. I cried for Caspian, for the grandchildren I might never see again, for the life I'd lost, for the woman I used to be. But mostly I cried because I was starting to believe what Zara's actions had told me all along, that I was disposable, that 4 years of love and service and sacrifice meant nothing, that I was just an inconvenience to be discarded when I was no longer useful. The crying jag left me exhausted, and I fell asleep slumped against the car door, my cheek pressed against the cold window. I dreamed about Caspian as a little boy, tugging on my apron and asking for help reaching something on a high shelf. In the dream, I was young again, strong again, needed again. I woke up to the sound of my phone ringing, a number I didn't recognize displaying on the cracked screen. For a moment, I considered not answering. In my experience lately, unknown numbers meant bills I couldn't pay or people I couldn't help. But something made me slide my finger across the screen. Mrs. Patterson, this is David Morgan from Morgan and Associates Law Firm. I was your son, Caspian's attorney. I've been trying to reach you for several days. We need to discuss some urgent matters regarding Caspian's estate. My heart started racing. In my experience, lawyers calling meant problems, medical bills, insurance issues, things I couldn't afford to deal with. I cleared my throat, trying to sound more put together than I felt sitting in my car behind a diner at 7 a.m. Yes, this is Diane Patterson. I've been trying to reach you for several days. We need to discuss some urgent matters regarding Caspian's estate. Could you come to my office today? It's quite important. Estate? Caspian had always been careful with money, but I assumed whatever he had would go to Zara and the children. I'm not sure I understand. Zara handles all of Caspian's affairs now. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Mrs. Patterson, there are specific provisions in your son's will that concern you directly, provisions that Mrs. Patterson, Zara, is not aware of. I really need to speak with you in person. Something in his tone made my pulse quicken. Can you tell me what this is about? Not over the phone. Can you be here at 10 a.m.? I'm located downtown, the Sterling Building on Oak Street. I looked down at my wrinkled clothes, ran a hand through my unwashed hair. Mr. Morgan, I should probably mention that I'm going through a difficult time right now. I might not look very presentable. Mrs. Patterson, his voice was gentle but firm. Please come as you are. This cannot wait any longer. 3 hours later, I sat in the most luxurious office I'd ever been in, feeling completely out of place. David Morgan was a distinguished man in his 50s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He'd offered me coffee, which I'd accepted gratefully. It was the first decent cup I'd had in weeks. Mrs. Patterson, before we begin, I need to ask you something, and please answer honestly. What is your current living situation? The question caught me off guard, and I felt heat rise to my cheeks. I'm between homes at the moment. His expression grew concerned. Caspian mentioned that there might be issues with Zara after his passing. Are you staying with friends? Family? The kindness in his voice almost undid me. I looked down at my hands wrapped around the warm coffee mug. I'm staying in my car. I see. He made a note on his legal pad, and I expected judgment, but his face showed only compassion. Caspian was a very intuitive man. He anticipated this might happen. He pulled out a thick manila folder and opened it carefully. Mrs. Patterson, I need to read you several sections of your son's will. But first, let me ask, what do you know about Caspian's financial situation? Not much. I know he had life insurance through his work and the house, but I assumed it all went to Zara and the children. Mr. Morgan nodded slowly. Caspian came to see me about 6 months ago, shortly after his cancer diagnosis. He was very specific about certain changes he wanted to make to his will, changes that he asked me to keep completely confidential until after his death. He pulled out a document and adjusted his glasses. Let me read you the relevant section. To my beloved mother, Diane Patterson, who sacrificed so much for my happiness and well-being throughout my life, I leave the sum of $7 million to be held in trust and managed by Morgan and Associates until such time as Mrs. Patterson can establish stable housing and financial management. The words seemed to hang in the air. I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? $7 million, Mrs. Patterson. Your son was far wealthier than most people knew. He'd been making extremely successful investments for years, and his life insurance policy was substantial. I felt dizzy, but Zara said she said everything belonged to her now. Mrs. Patterson, may I ask what exactly Zara told you? The words tumbled out, the eviction from the house, the casual cruelty, the complete dismissal of my 4 years of service to the family. As I spoke, Mr. Morgan's expression grew increasingly grim. Caspian specifically anticipated this scenario, he said when I finished. There's more to the will that you need to hear. He flipped to another page. In the event that my wife, Zara Patterson, attempts to remove my mother from the family home or otherwise cut off contact between my mother and my children, full custody of Lily Patterson and Jake Patterson shall immediately transfer to my mother, Diane Patterson, with all necessary financial support included. My coffee mug slipped from my numb fingers, and Mr. Morgan quickly moved to catch it before it hit his expensive carpet. Custody? I whispered, but how is that possible? Caspian filed all the necessary paperwork months ago. He documented several concerning behaviors he'd observed in Zara. Her increasing focus on his life insurance payouts, her comments about starting fresh after his death, her apparent lack of emotional connection to the children's grief process. He pulled out another folder, this one thicker. Caspian also set up recordings of several conversations with Zara during his final weeks. Conversations where she discussed her plans for after his death, including her intention to send you away and possibly relocate the children to be closer to her sister in Arizona. He recorded her? With legal counsel's guidance, yes. Caspian was very concerned about his children's welfare. He'd noticed that Zara seemed to view them more as accessories to her lifestyle than as individuals with their own needs. Mr. Morgan opened another document. There's also a letter he wrote to you to be delivered with this information. Would you like me to read it, or would you prefer to read it privately? My hands were shaking so badly I didn't trust myself to hold paper. Could you read it, please? He unfolded a sheet of paper covered in Caspian's familiar handwriting. Mom, if you're hearing this, it means my worst fears about Zara have come true. I'm so sorry I couldn't warn you while I was alive, but I was afraid she'd turn the kids against you if she knew what I suspected about her true feelings toward our family. I've been watching her for months, and I've seen how she looks at you when she thinks no one is paying attention. I've heard her on the phone with her sister talking about how much easier her life will be when she doesn't have to deal with Caspian's needy mother anymore. I know she probably told you that you're not wanted, that you're a burden. She's wrong. You are the most loving, selfless person I've ever known. You gave up your own comfort to help us, and I will never forget that. The money I'm leaving you isn't just an inheritance. It's payment for all the years you put our needs before your own. It's also my way of making sure you have the power to protect Lily and Jake the way you always protected me. I know Zara will fight this, but I've made sure she can't win. You are their grandmother, and you love them in a way she never has and never will. They need you, Mom. I need you to take care of them. Don't let guilt or doubt stop you from claiming what's rightfully yours. You earned every penny, and those children need at least one parent who puts their emotional well-being first. I love you, and I'm sorry I waited so long to make sure you were protected. Your grateful son, Caspian. By the time Mr. Morgan finished reading, tears were streaming down my face. Not tears of grief this time, but something else entirely. Relief, vindication, and underneath it all, a growing sense of power I hadn't felt in weeks. "When can we proceed with the custody transfer?" I asked, my voice steadier than it had been in days. Mr. Morgan smiled. "We can file the paperwork this afternoon, but first let's get you out of that car and into a hotel while we arrange for more permanent housing. Caspian set aside funds specifically for your immediate needs." As we discussed logistics, I felt something shifting inside me. For 2 weeks, I'd been a victim of circumstances, of Zara's cruelty, of my own helplessness. But sitting in that office, learning about the elaborate safety net my son had constructed around me and his children, I realized I wasn't a victim anymore. I was about to become the most important person in Lily and Jake's lives, with the financial means to give them everything they needed and the legal authority to protect them from their mother's emotional neglect. Caspian had given me more than money. He'd given me purpose, power, and the chance to honor his memory by loving his children the way he'd always loved me. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. 3 days later, I stood in front of the house that had been my home for 4 years, but this time, everything was different. This time, I held legal documents that changed everything. Mr. Morgan had insisted on accompanying me, along with a social worker from the county and a police officer. Standard procedure for custody transfers, he'd explained. I'd spent the previous 2 nights in a comfortable hotel suite, eating room service and taking long, hot showers, while Mr. Morgan's office arranged for emergency housing assistance and processed the legal paperwork. I was wearing new clothes, nothing fancy, but clean and properly fitted. I'd gotten my hair styled and felt more like myself than I had in weeks. But the biggest change wasn't visible. It was the way I carried myself, the quiet confidence that came from knowing I wasn't powerless anymore. "Remember," Mr. Morgan said quietly as we walked up the front path, "let me do most of the talking initially. This will be a shock to Mrs. Patterson, and she may react emotionally." The police officer, a kind-faced woman named Officer Rodriguez, nodded toward the house. "I can see movement inside. Looks like someone's home." I pressed the doorbell, the same doorbell I'd heard thousands of times, but never as a visitor with legal authority. Through the frosted glass, I could see Zara's figure approaching. She was probably expecting a delivery, or maybe one of her friends stopping by to admire her redecorating project. The door swung open, and Zara's expression went through several rapid changes: confusion, recognition, annoyance, and finally something approaching panic as she noticed the official entourage behind me. "Diane, what is this? What are you doing here?" Mr. Morgan stepped forward smoothly. "Mrs. Patterson, I'm David Morgan, Caspian's attorney. We need to discuss some important legal matters concerning your children. May we come in?" "I don't understand. Diane, why are there police here? Are you in some kind of trouble?" The irony wasn't lost on me. Even now, even seeing me with lawyers and official documentation, Zara's first assumption was that I was the problem, that I was the one who had done something wrong. "Mrs. Patterson," Officer Rodriguez said gently, "we're here to execute a legal custody transfer. May we step inside so we can discuss this privately?" Zara's face went pale, but she stepped back to let us in. The living room looked exactly as it had in her Facebook photos: sterile, expensive, and completely devoid of anything that suggested children lived here. Gone were Caspian's warm touches, the family photos, the comfortable furniture where the kids used to do homework and watch movies. "Where are Lily and Jake?" the social worker asked, consulting her clipboard. "They're at school," Zara said automatically, then seemed to realize the implications of the question. "Wait, what did you mean by custody transfer? What is this about?" Mr. Morgan opened his briefcase and pulled out the documents we'd discussed. "Mrs. Patterson, I need to inform you of certain provisions in your late husband's will that are now taking effect." As he read the relevant sections aloud, I watched Zara's face transform. The polished mask she always wore began to crack, revealing something raw and desperate underneath. "That's impossible," she interrupted, her voice rising. "Caspian never said anything about this. You're lying. I have all the original documents here, Mrs. Patterson, including audio recordings of conversations between you and Caspian where these concerns were discussed. Recordings? Her voice was a whisper now. Mr. Morgan pulled out a small digital device. Caspian documented several conversations where you discussed your plans for after his death, including your intention to remove Mrs. Diane Patterson from the children's lives and potentially relocate to Arizona. He pressed play, and Caspian's voice filled the room. Even after weeks, hearing him speak made my chest tighten with grief. Zara, I need to know what your plans are for Mom after I'm gone. Zara's recorded voice was cold, matter of fact. Caspian, we've talked about this. Your mother is lovely, but she's not my responsibility. The kids and I need space to heal and move forward. Move forward to where? I've been thinking Arizona might be nice. Fresh start, closer to my sister. The kids would love the desert. And Mom, your mother is a grown woman, Caspian. She'll figure something out. The recording continued, but I stopped listening to the words. Instead, I watched Zara's face as she heard her own voice, dismissing me so casually, discussing my future like I was a piece of furniture she needed to dispose of. When the recording stopped, the silence in the room was deafening. "How dare you?" Zara whispered, and for a moment, I thought she was talking to Mr. Morgan. Then she turned to me, her eyes blazing with fury. "How dare you come into my home with these people and try to take my children?" "They're not just your children," I said quietly, speaking for the first time since we'd entered. "They're Caspian's children too, and according to his will, they're now my responsibility. You can't do this, I'll fight it. I'll prove you're unfit, you're homeless, you have no job, no money." Mr. Morgan cleared his throat. "Mrs. Patterson, I should inform you that Mrs. Diane Patterson is now the beneficiary of a $7 million inheritance from Caspian's estate. Her housing and financial situation have been completely resolved." The number hit Zara like a physical blow. She actually stumbled backward, catching herself against the white leather sofa that had replaced Caspian's comfortable old sectional. $7 million? Her voice was barely audible. But the life insurance was only $2 million. I already received that. Caspian had significant investments and assets beyond the life insurance policy, Mr. Morgan explained patiently. Assets that he chose to leave to his mother, along with custody of his children. I watched Zara's mind racing, trying to process this information. I could see the exact moment when the reality hit her. Not only had she lost the children, she'd lost access to the money she'd probably been counting on. As the official group began to file out to prepare for the school pickup, Zara grabbed my arm. "Diane, please, you don't understand what you're doing. Those kids need stability, routine. I can provide that." I looked down at her hand on my arm, remembering all the times I'd reached out to her over the years, offering help, comfort, support, only to be politely but firmly pushed away. "Zara," I said gently, removing her hand from my arm, "you had your chance to provide stability. Instead, you provided redecoration projects and fresh starts." I walked toward the door, then paused and turned back. "The children will be allowed to see you, of course. Caspian wanted them to have a relationship with their mother, but it will be supervised visits, and it will be on my terms." "This isn't over," she called after me, but her voice lacked conviction. As we drove toward the elementary school, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and anticipation. Sadness for the family that Caspian had tried so hard to hold together, and anticipation for the chance to give Lily and Jake what they really needed. Not a perfect house or expensive clothes, but someone who would listen to their fears, honor their father's memory, and love them unconditionally, the way Caspian had always loved me. The first thing Lily said when she saw me waiting outside her classroom wasn't "Grandma Diane" or "What are you doing here?" It was a whisper that broke my heart. "Are you real, or am I dreaming again?" I knelt down to her level, ignoring the curious stares from other parents and teachers. "I'm real, sweetheart. and I'm here to take you and Jake home. But Mommy said you went away because you didn't want to live with us anymore. Her voice was so small, so careful, like she was afraid the wrong words might make me disappear again. I felt the social worker's gentle hand on my shoulder, a reminder that I needed to be careful how I responded, that everything I said would be part of the official record. But looking into Lily's confused 6-year-old eyes, I couldn't bring myself to care about documentation. Your mommy was wrong, Lily. I never wanted to leave you. I love you and Jake more than anything in the world. Jake appeared from his classroom down the hall, his 6-year-old swagger faltering the moment he spotted me. For a second, his face lit up with pure joy. Then he seemed to remember something, and his expression closed off. Mom said you were mad at us, he said when he reached us, his voice trying to sound casual but failing. She said that's why you left without saying goodbye. I looked between these two beautiful children, seeing the careful walls they'd built around their feelings, the way they'd learned to protect themselves from disappointment. In just 2 weeks, they'd already started adapting to a world where people they loved could vanish without warning. Jake, Lily, I need you both to listen to me very carefully, I said, sitting down on the hallway floor so we were all at the same level. I didn't leave because I was mad at you or because I didn't want to live with you. I left because your mother asked me to leave, and I thought I had to do what she said. But you're our grandma, Lily said, tears starting to form in her eyes. Grandmas aren't supposed to leave. You're absolutely right. Grandmas aren't supposed to leave, and I'm never leaving you again. The social worker cleared her throat gently. Children, your grandmother is going to be taking care of you from now on. She has a nice place for you to stay, and all the legal paperwork has been completed. Jake's eyes widened. You mean we don't have to live with Mom anymore? The question hung in the air, and I realized that these children had been just as unhappy with their post-Caspian life as I'd suspected. They'd been grieving not just their father, but the warmth and comfort that had disappeared from their home, along with him. You'll still see your mother, I explained carefully, but you'll live with me. We'll have our own place with room for all your things and all your memories of Daddy. Can I have pictures of Daddy in my room? Lily asked immediately. Mommy put them all away because she said they made her too sad. You can have as many pictures as you want. We'll make a whole wall of Daddy pictures if that's what makes you happy. That first evening, we ordered pizza and sat on the living room floor of our temporary apartment eating it straight from the box, something Zara never would have allowed in her perfectly maintained house. I told them stories about their father as a little boy, stories they'd never heard before, and watched them laugh for the first time in weeks. Daddy really put peanut butter in his hair? Lily giggled. He was convinced it would make his hair grow faster so he could look like his favorite baseball player. Your grandfather was not amused when he came home from work and found Caspian's hair full of Skippy. What did Grandpa do? Jake asked, completely absorbed in the story. He sat your daddy down in the kitchen and spent 2 hours washing his hair with dish soap. And then he told him that if he wanted to be like his baseball hero, he should practice hitting and catching instead of experimenting with condiments. Over the next few weeks, I watched Lily and Jake slowly come back to life. Lily started having tea parties with her stuffed animals again instead of keeping them lined up perfectly on her shelf. Jake began leaving his baseball cards scattered across the coffee table instead of immediately putting everything away. They started asking questions about their father, not just the sanitized memories Zara had allowed, but real questions about his childhood, his fears, his dreams, his sense of humor. I showed them videos on my phone of Caspian teaching them to ride bikes, of family barbecues, of quiet Sunday mornings when he'd make pancakes in funny shapes. Daddy was really scared of spiders, Jake asked one evening as we looked through old photo albums. Terrified. When he was about your age, he called me screaming from the bathroom because there was a spider on the wall. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of our new home, a modest 3-bedroom house with a backyard where Lily could practice cartwheels. and Jake could throw his baseball against the fence. I listened to the sounds of children being children. No tiptoeing around expensive furniture, no whispered conversations, no constant worry about disturbing someone's peace. Lily was upstairs playing music while she organized her rock collection, something that would have sent Zara into a panic about noise levels and mess. Jake was in the living room, sprawled on the floor with his homework spread across the coffee table, occasionally calling out math questions for me to help him solve. These were the sounds Caspian had wanted to protect when he made his secret arrangements. This was the life he'd envisioned for his children: messy, loud, real, and full of unconditional love. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. Through the front window, I could see a familiar figure standing on the porch, and my stomach tightened with old anxiety before I reminded myself that things were different now. Zara stood on my doorstep holding a small gift bag, looking more uncertain than I'd ever seen her. The past 6 months hadn't been kind to her. Word around town was that she'd had to sell the showcase house. Apparently, Caspian's investments and insurance money had been specifically structured so that most of it went to his children's trust fund and to me, leaving her with only enough to start over, not enough to maintain her expensive lifestyle. "Hello, Diane," she said when I opened the door. "I was hoping I could see the children for a few minutes." "It's not your scheduled visitation day," I said calmly. Over the months, we'd established a routine: supervised visits every other Saturday afternoon, with the understanding that any changes needed to be discussed in advance. "I know, I brought Lily something for her birthday next week, and I thought maybe we could talk." I studied her face, looking for signs of the manipulation that had once come so naturally to her. Instead, I saw something I'd never seen before: genuine humility. "The children are doing homework," I said, "but you can come in for a few minutes." She followed me into the living room where Jake looked up from his math problems with a polite but guarded expression. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, sweetheart. How's school going?" "Good. I made the honor roll again." His voice was matter of fact, neither seeking her approval nor rejecting her interest. "That's wonderful, Jake. Your father would be so proud." Something in her tone was different, softer, less performative. Jake seemed to notice it too because his posture relaxed slightly. "Lily," I called upstairs, "your mother is here." Lily appeared at the top of the stairs, and I watched Zara's face change as she took in her daughter's appearance. Lily's hair was in a messy ponytail. She was wearing comfortable clothes that had definitely seen better days, and there was a streak of something that might have been paint on her cheek. She looked exactly like what she was, a 6-year-old girl who'd been allowed to be a child. "Hi, Mommy," Lily said, coming down the stairs, but stopping a few steps from the bottom. "I brought you an early birthday present," Zara said, holding out the gift bag. Lily looked at me for permission before accepting it, another sign of how much their relationship had changed. Inside the bag was a small silver locket, not expensive or flashy, just simple and pretty. "It has a picture of Daddy in it," Zara said quietly. "I thought you might like to wear it sometimes." Lily opened the locket and smiled when she saw Caspian's photo inside. "Thank you, Mommy. It's really pretty." After Lily went back upstairs and Jake returned to his homework, Zara and I stood in the kitchen, the space thick with unspoken words. "They look happy," she said finally. "They are happy. They're allowed to be sad sometimes too, which is equally important." She nodded slowly. "I wanted to apologize, Diane, for how I treated you after Caspian died, for the things I said." I leaned against the counter, studying her face. "What changed?" "Losing them," she said simply. "Losing the children made me realize that I'd been losing them already, bit by bit, by trying to control everything instead of just loving them. Seeing how much they've thrived with you made me understand that Caspian was right. He knew what they needed, and he knew I wasn't ready to give it to them." It was the closest thing to accountability I'd ever heard from Zara, and I found myself softening slightly despite myself. "They still need their mother," I said carefully. just not the mother you were trying to be. They need you to be real with them, to let them see your emotions, to admit when you make mistakes. I don't know how to do that. I was raised to keep everything together, to never let anyone see you struggle. Caspian struggled too, especially at the end, but he let the children see that it was okay to be scared, okay to be sad, okay to need help. That's what made him such a good father. Zara was quiet for a long moment, then said something that surprised me. You're a good grandmother, Diane. Better than I ever gave you credit for. I love them. That's all I've ever done. No, it's more than that. You listen to them. You see who they really are instead of trying to make them into who you think they should be. As she prepared to leave, Zara paused at the front door. Diane, would it be possible to schedule an extra visit next week for Lily's birthday? I'd like to take both children out for ice cream, just the three of us. I considered the request. 6 months ago, I would have been terrified to let the children go anywhere alone with Zara. But the woman standing in front of me wasn't the same person who'd thrown away Caspian's belongings and dismissed my grief. She wasn't completely transformed. That would take years if it happened at all. But she was trying. 1 hour, I said, and they call me when you pick them up and when you drop them off. Thank you. After she left, Jake looked up from his homework. Grandma Diane, do you think Mom is getting better? It was such a perceptive question from a 6-year-old, and I realized that these children had been watching their mother just as carefully as I had. I think she's trying to get better, I said honestly. What do you think? She seemed sadder, but nicer, he said thoughtfully, like maybe she misses Dad the way we do now. That evening, after both children were in bed, I sat on the back porch with a cup of tea and thought about the strange journey that had brought us to this point. 6 months ago, I'd been sleeping in my car, convinced that I was unwanted and unnecessary. Tonight, I was the legal guardian of 2 thriving children, living in a comfortable home with enough financial security to never worry about basic needs again. But the money wasn't the real gift Caspian had given me. The real gift was purpose. For the first time in years, I woke up every morning knowing exactly why I was needed, not as a convenient babysitter or household helper, but as the person who loved these children unconditionally and would always put their emotional needs first. The next morning, Lily found me in the kitchen making pancakes, Caspian's recipe, with too much vanilla and a pinch of cinnamon that he'd never measured but somehow always got exactly right. Grandma Diane, she said, climbing onto her usual stool at the breakfast counter, I had a dream about Daddy last night. Was it a good dream or a sad dream? Good. He was making pancakes just like you are, and he told me he was happy that you're taking care of us. I felt tears prick my eyes, but I didn't try to hide them. Lily had learned that it was okay for adults to cry, that tears didn't mean something was wrong. Now I'm curious about you. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever gone through something like this? Let me know in the comments. And while you're here, I've left 2 of my other stories on screen. I promise they'll surprise you. Thanks for watching all the way to the end.